Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're stepping into a fascinating and honestly kind of unsettling world, the world of hybrid animals. For millions of years, the natural world has operated on this really strict set of boundaries, keeping species totally distinct and specialized for their own environments. But today, we're looking at what exactly happens when those ancient boundaries are completely shattered. It really begs the question, right? What happens when evolution's rules are just flat out ignored? Well, we're going to explore creatures that, biologically speaking, really shouldn't exist. And yet, there they are, walking, swimming, and thriving right now. Think about it like this. Nature spent millions of years building walls between species. We are watching them fall. We are literally watching these massive evolutionary boundaries collapse in real time. And there are two main forces tearing them down. First, human hands, usually driven by curiosity or, let's be real, vanity. And second, a rapidly changing planet that's shifting the very ground right out from under these animals. Okay, let's dive into this. Section 1, Evolution's Invisible Walls. Before we can really wrap our heads around these hybrids, we've got to understand the walls that are supposed to keep them apart in the first place. And we're not just talking about physical geography here. We're talking about deeply ingrained genetic and behavioral barriers. The whole foundation of this is a concept called evolutionary divergence. This is basically the process where species split and develop completely separate genetic, behavioral, and physical traits over millions of years. This divergence, that is the invisible wall. It's what ensures a creature is perfectly adapted to its specific niche and absolutely does not mix with a species rocking a totally different survival strategy. Now, what's really staggering about this is the sheer scale of time we're talking about here. Evolution took roughly 600,000 years to separate the polar bear and the grizzly bear. It spent 2 million years dividing the lion and the tiger. And it spent an absolutely astonishing 30 million years building a wall between the camel and the llama. These aren't just minor biological suggestions, they are ancient, hardened rules. Which brings us to Section 2, Captivity and Genetic Malfunctions. So this is where we shift our focus to our first catalyst, human intervention. When we put animals in captivity and breed them just for our own amusement, we break all of nature's rules. Let's start with a famous one. On one side, you have the male lion, a highly social group hunter. On the other side, the female tiger, a totally solitary predator. When breeders force them together, they create a Liger. But remember that massive timeline we just talked about? Their genetic incompatibility runs 2 million years deep. They developed completely different chromosome expression patterns that were literally never meant to recombine. And when they do recombine, the results are just wild. Ligers can reach lengths of 11 feet and weigh over 900 pounds. That makes them the largest living cats on Earth. But I want to be super clear here. This massive size, it's not a feature. It's a tragic malfunction. You see, both parent species carry specific growth-inhibiting genes, but when they're mixed together, those regulatory genes completely fail. The liger just keeps growing, and that leads to a laundry list of severe health defects. We're talking heart problems, neurological issues, and severely shortened lifespans. It's basically walking evidence of biological systems that should never have been mixed. We see another profound mismatch with the Zorse. On the one hand, you have the domestic horse with 64 chromosomes, selectively bred for thousands of years to be super tolerant of humans. On the other hand, you've got the wild zebra with 32 to 46 chromosomes, which has absolutely zero tolerance for humans. The clash here isn't just happening in the cell nucleus. It is a massive clash of deeply ingrained behavioral conditioning. Zorses actually inherit the zebra's aggression and their flat refusal to be ridden, which makes them practically useless for the pack work humans bred them for in the first place. So, the crucial point here is understanding why this kind of hybridization is just biologically doomed from the start. It all comes down to meiosis. That's the cell division process that creates sex cells. Because the horse and the zebra have such drastically mismatched chromosome numbers, the offspring end up with an odd number of chromosomes. Because of that, cell division fails entirely. The Zorse is born completely sterile. It's literally a genetic dead end, just with stripes. And, the cruelty of this forced hybridization isn't just limited to mammals. Take a look at the blood parrot cichlids. It's a fish that was created in Taiwan in the 1980s by crossing completely different Central American cichlids. And the results? Deformed mouths that can't even close properly, curved spines that compress their internal organs, and severe swim bladder problems that mess up their buoyancy. These are systemic, total failures of skeletal and organ development, and it was all forced into existence purely for bright orange colors and a heart-shaped body that the aquarium trade thought looked cute.
But honestly, perhaps the most absurd example of ignoring evolutionary walls is the comma. Picture this, a 1,400-pound dromedary camel from the Middle East crossed with a 300-pound llama from South America. They are separated by an entire ocean and 30 million years of evolution. Natural breeding is physically impossible here, so scientists in Dubai actually used artificial insemination back in 1998, hoping to get an animal with camel-like size and llama-like wool. But instead, they got a totally sterile, llama-sized animal with highly unpredictable aggression.
Now let's look at a different kind of catalyst. Section 3, Climate and Habitat Collapses. Because human interference is really only half the story. We're pivoting now from captivity out into the wild, where a changing environment is forcing entirely new, totally unstoppable evolutionary collisions. Out in the wild, hybrids aren't made for aesthetics. They are emerging purely for survival. This is a huge shift from the vanity projects we were just looking at. Out in nature, animals aren't being forced together in cages. They are being pushed together by shrinking habitats and collapsing ecosystems. To understand how this even starts, we've got to look at the word extirpated, which basically means rooted out and destroyed completely in a specific region. So, for example, humans extirpated wolves from the eastern United States. But that didn't just remove a predator. It left a massive, completely empty ecological territory. And guess what? Coyotes happily moved right on in. As those coyotes expanded, they started breeding with remnant wolves and feral dogs, and boom, you get the Coywolf. Just consider the immense survival advantages this hybrid has. At 55 to 60 pounds, they are significantly larger than pure coyotes. They've got the wolf's pack-hunting social structure and much stronger jaws. But they also have the domestic dog's lack of fear toward humans. And because they're all closely related canids, this hybrid is incredibly fertile. They're actively replacing pure coyote populations right now, adapting brilliantly to human-altered urban and suburban landscapes. And this brilliantly illustrates what happens when the climate forces two massive apex predators together. The polar bear evolved specifically to live on sea ice and hunt seals, right? While the grizzly bear evolved for land and omnivorous foraging. Historically, their ranges never, ever overlapped. But as climate change dramatically shrinks Arctic sea ice, polar bears are being forced onto land for much longer periods, and that is placing them directly into grizzly territory. The result? The growler bear, or Pizzly. The first confirmed wild hybrid was documented back in 2006, but here is the truly shocking part. DNA testing shows there are now second-generation hybrids out there. This means growler bears are actually fertile. They are out there breeding with each other and back-crossing with the parent species. A 600,000-year evolutionary wall is literally collapsing in a matter of decades, right before our eyes. And the shifting ice is changing the oceans too. Just look at the Narliga mystery. In the 1980s, an Inuit hunter in Greenland found this really bizarre skull with teeth that were basically halfway between a narwhal's straight tusk and a beluga's conical teeth. It literally sat unidentified in a museum for 30 years until 2019 when DNA testing finally confirmed it was a hybrid of a female narwhal and a male beluga. Overlapping Arctic ranges brought two completely distinct whale species together, proving that these biological barriers were way lower than we ever assumed. Let's move on and see how this builds into our final point. Section 4, the fragility of domestication. So, what happens when domestication fails? We've looked at wild adaptation, sure, but what about the animals we thought we had totally conquered and fundamentally changed? What happens when our genetic control over an animal just slips and it gets a chance to mix its genes with its ancient wild counterparts? Well, when a domestic pig escapes and breeds with a wild boar, you don't just get a slightly muddy farm animal. You get an Iron Age pig. Check this out. In a single generation, they lose the domestic pig's cute little snout and develop the boar's elongated snout and those dangerous lower jaw tusks. They completely lose all that domestic docility, and instead they exhibit pure, dangerous wild boar aggression and hardcore survival instincts. It turns out domestication is really just a super thin layer of genetic suppression. I mean, humans spent 9,000 years selectively breeding pigs to suppress their wild traits. But those traits, they were never actually erased. One single breeding cycle with a wild boar, and all that suppression utterly fails. 9,000 years of human engineering just vanishes overnight, creating an incredibly destructive and adaptable invasive species. Which leaves us with this final crazy thought. Evolution spent millions of years meticulously building these genetic walls to balance our ecosystems.
If human vanity and a rapidly changing climate just keep tearing those boundaries down, what new, unpredictable species will rule the Earth next? We are watching a real-time rewrite of nature's playbook. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and as always, keep questioning the world around you.